Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Kristan Swan. She is an experiential learner and soulful thinker, and we'll learn from her powerful concepts like mapping your spiritual autobiography, reframing problems, and becoming a better stranger. Welcome to the show, Kristan.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so looking forward to our conversation here. I'm excited to be here. This is
You
good
are
stuff.
welcome. You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Kristen. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about mapping hope, meaning, and presence. We'll talk a lot of things to understand, about perspective and about humility, as well as so many other things. So we'll talk about all that. But before that, let's talk a bit about your background, your story, your journey, so that the audience knows better about who they are listening to.
Yeah, of course. Well, I've had a very kind of twisty and turny journey professionally. I've done many different things, and the through lines for me, I think, as I realized, whether it was I was working in the restaurant industry or when I had my own design business, working in landscape design and also doing interior spaces, I worked for a union at one point as a business agent. And, but all of these things really were related to people. And I wasn't motivated by a job title or something of that nature. For me, it was always about who was I working with. And particularly as I started to develop my own business around the design work and then later business coaching, I realized that I I get so much joy from helping other people succeed. And I know that could sound really a little bit superficial, and of course, we all want people to succeed. I think the thing that I really landed on, though, is having people succeed in a way that was authentic to themselves. And so in order to do that, you have to know who you are, right? You have to understand what your strengths are and what brings you joy. So I kind of fast forward to what I do now is around creating group experiences for people to share stories and also examine their own stories, and in that process both get in touch more with who they are in a way, and also recognizing their own wisdom and experience and expertise as something that is uniquely theirs.
Absolutely, absolutely, Kristen. So let me ask you, who is
Yeah.
Kristen Swan? How have you discovered yourself? How do you want to tell others about you? What is it that you are trying to do? What should people understand of your journey and what you are doing right now?
I think what I would share about myself at a deeply personal level is that I did not know myself very well, and I did not have a good sense either when I was growing up and even as a young adult. I didn't have a good sense of what I wanted to do. So many of my choices were based on either kind of people pleasing, people coming to me and me meeting their needs, and also a lot of what I did also was because someone else was telling me I was good at this, and so then therefore, I would end up, taking this job or something, and it there was I was so busy kind of doing that living, I guess, essentially a very external life that it, in my personal life, led to some choices that were not the best choices for me. And so after having two marriages and two divorces, specifically, going, as I mentioned, having a succession of jobs, I I really realized I had to slow down and get to know myself and also trust myself. I think there was also an element that I wasn't very trusting um, of kind of what I knew. I was too willing to think that someone else knew better, which is when I say that now, that makes me so sad because I think we we know so much about ourselves, and there is a lot of pressure in kind of our culture or society where we abdicate that knowledge or that self assurance, or that we have, thinking that someone else is the expert. And it was really through my coaching practice and watching my coaching clients, business coaching, and these were independent business owners who had founded their businesses and were running them. So a lot of times we were thinking about how do you mature with your business. And I was watching them make choices, and I was also watching them kind of have make some choices that were repeatedly not maybe in their best interest or their business's best interest. And really, it's always easier, right, to see what other people are doing than to self-reflect. And it was through that process that I initially came up with Spaghetti on the Wall, which is my journal that gives people a a guided prompted journaling experience. And that was really about having people recognize their own value, and how much they knew themselves.
Absolutely. So, what is so difficult about knowing ourselves? What is it that we includes knowing? What is knowing ourselves all about? Why is it so difficult? Why does it take so many years to know about ourselves? I want to understand, because I want to understand then, if we don't know about ourselves, how can we become a better stranger? So let's first tackle this part, then we'll come to the other part.
So, I mean, getting to know ourselves, I think that it is more difficult than it should be, right? I mean, as you're posing the question, I'm chuckling because it sounds so simple. It sounds so simple, and yet we are we we are beings that live in community, and so there are always outside influences, and I think that there are, depending on where you grow up and how you grow up, there are going to be, I mean, I think about stories, right? I mean, let's use the example of stories. There are the stories that we tell ourselves, right? And that may be information that we get from different experiences. It can be everything from, being in grade school, right? And being told, oh, you're excellent at math, you're not so great at, English. And we, at certain points, when we hear those bits of information, we start to believe that they're true, right? And so that's one of those stories that we might self-perpetuate, where it's like, oh gosh, I'm not good at English, I'm just good at math. And then there's also the stories that we kind of have inherited from our families, right? And that can be anything from that, you've got to work. I mean, I think about kind of my own inherited stories around, boy, you've got to, if you're not, if work isn't hard, and if you're not working really, really hard, then you must be goofing off. And if, and goofing off is not to be, that's we're not going to allow for any goofing off. And so there's like those inherited stories. And then I think there's also those stories that we choose to share about ourselves, right? And sometimes we are, it can be hard. You had talked about humility at the beginning of the episode, and it can be difficult for us to share in a way that reveals ourselves in our full humanity, right? And because we want to, maybe we're in a like a job interview, or maybe we're sitting here and we're having a conversation, and it's like, oh gosh, you want to come across in a positive way. And so what are those stories that you reveal about yourself? But what I have found is, and most people, I was just having a discussion last night at dinner, and again, this idea that we learn so much from our failures, right? And I think we all agree on that, yet nobody really goes out looking for failure, right? I mean, that that would be too painful. And when we know that that's how we learn, I think I think so much about just being open with my own journey and sharing kind of, all the parts of my journey, the flattering ones, the less flattering ones. And I mean, when I first started my business, I did not know what I was doing. I was talk about working hard. I got the working hard part, but I was absolutely broke. I didn't know how to run a business, and I was doing everything wrong. And then however many years down the road, I ended up being a business coach, and you would probably say, "Gosh, what how can you be a business coach?" And I actually, I used to question myself too, but as it turns out, I was really good at it because I had I had really done a lot of things wrong, which gave me information that I could then share with people and help others.
Absolutely. And that brings me to the stranger part. You talk about becoming a, better stranger. What is this better stranger about ourselves? And help us understand what are the qualities of this stranger. Should we become better strangers by showing the original us? Or should we, show the stranger to have a lot of embellishments? Who will look much, much better?
Uh, well, I I love the idea that there there is an abundance of kindness in this world, and it's very, very easy to see the negativity. I mean, we are bombarded with that on a daily basis. And what I know is what I can do in each moment, right? How I can show up and be a better stranger in those instances where I am with people that I don't know, and people that I haven't necessarily, it and I I'm always looking for, I guess, the ability to interact with people in a spontaneous way, because so much of our life is kind of scripted at this point, right? We generally, if I were to take a map and look at kind of the errands that I do each week, or the appointments that I go to, or it's a pretty fixed, area that I'm, and so when I have opportunities to do, I mean, at the grocery store, or at the post office, or wherever I have the ability to be with people that I don't know, how can I how can I lead with kindness is really, and that can be the simplest thing, from letting someone, go ahead of you if they look like they're in a rush, or it can be just saying hello and asking how someone is. And so I think we can, that is a way of being kind of that better stranger. And then also we can be, just even kind of within ourselves, right? Remain curious with yourself. Like, I guess, approach your own inner self with a bit of a beginner's mind, right? Be willing to think that maybe you don't know everything there is to know about yourself, because I think we're constantly evolving, and there is the capacity to grow and learn if we're willing.
Absolutely, absolutely, Christian. Now let's understand much more about ourselves. You talk about mapping your spiritual autobiography. What do you mean by that? And tell us a bit. How do I even autobiography itself? Is it about writing? Is it much more knowing ourselves? Help us know about that.
Well, in my Discovering Your Spiritual Autobiography class, we are predominantly writing. And so we are using, it's depending on if we're doing the long format, which is 8 weeks, or the shorter, more intensive workshops. There's a series of different prompts. And writing can be, writing can certainly be one of those things where we have a lot of self-judgment about, if we're a good writer or not. So one of the things that I am always trying to do in my classes is kind of ask kind of similar questions, but in different ways. And so it is it is through this, and an autobiography would imply perhaps a more kind of linear exploration of your life. You were born at this point, you were born in this place. And the spiritual autobiography is, it can be linear. It also can be really, what I'm kind of getting at is, earlier I was talking so much about getting to know your interior, getting to know who you really are. Spiritual autobiography, the focus is understanding who you are as it relates to that which is bigger than yourself. And I don't, it is a completely non-denominational experience. I don't, I'm not trying to prescribe or push one way of thinking around our spirituality, but it at the broadest terms, it's about that relationship with that which is our bigger than ourselves. So kind of understanding the collective, and who we are in that space. And I think why I believe that one of the things that really comes through in the process of these different reflections that we do is it does end up being hopeful, because at the end of the day, we're still here, right? And you can also recognize, as much as I think that stories are powerful and great ways that we can learn, I also think that we are not just our stories, right? We are bigger. I mean, my story of, being, growing up in Southern California, having parents that got divorced when I was 4, being an only child, moving around a lot, having a chaotic upbringing. Yeah, that is my story, and that has informed parts of my life and has made me who I am. And it's not all there is, right? So I think that that's the other piece of the Discovering Your Spiritual Autobiography.
Absolutely. And who is this for? Is it for everyone, or is it for only specific people who would want to do this?
Well, I do find that people who are a little bit older are enjoying doing this because they, have the time and the inclination to reflect on their life. I really, when I was putting this together, the curriculum for this, which I designed last year and launched it this year, it was something that I had done in the past, but I kind of redid it. The group that I'd love to see do this, which I've had a few participants who are younger, but I would love to get some younger participants, because I feel like I know for myself, like in my 20s and 30s, I could have benefited from slowing down a bit and doing more self-reflection and understanding again kind of that relationship with the thing that is bigger than myself. And I was just in a rush. There was this sense that everything had to be done in a rush. And so I'd love to get younger people. To date, the groups that I've done mostly tend to be people who have who have a few years on them and have some reflection.
Absolutely. You also have this journal book called Spaghetti on the Wall. Tell us a bit about that. How can people, make use of this particular journal?
Yeah, so Spaghetti on the Wall is the title. It refers to the way that growing up, we used to cook spaghetti or any pasta. Is you'd throw it on the ceiling, and if it stuck, then it was done. And so it's kind of this idea, right, of you just kind of see what sticks. As I mentioned, I was working with my business coaching clients, and I was seeing difficulty in communication, and I was seeing difficulty in uh, I was seeing patterns in how people were making decisions, and oftentimes decisions that were detrimental. So I thought, what would be a way to not so much change yourself? I don't know that I'm in the business of changing people. I think that really what I like to do is just bring awareness. If we have awareness around something, then I think we can do better. So, Spaghetti on the Wall, the whole idea is to journal. You can use it as a daily journal. You can also use it around kind of more event specific. But anyways, you start with a being the non-judgmental observer. So, and this is the key, right? You've got to get out of saying, I did this and it was horrible, or I did this and it was so great, I loved it, or whatever. So you are pretty much journaling about, if it's we're journaling about our day, then we are documenting what happened in our day with just no judgment. And then we go forward and after having kind of recounted the event or the day, then we go through and we ask ourselves, like, where were those moments that I just had kind of an incredible sense of peace or joy throughout the day. And then conversely, when were there those moments that I didn't feel so great? Maybe I felt angry. I felt sad. I just felt like my chest was tightening, right? I mean, and I think sometimes there can be so much information in those places where we feel discomfort that it's worth really zeroing in on those, not to wallow, but really that's important information for us as we get to know ourselves. And then the other prompts are asking you kind of, did you have some creative thoughts, out of the box thinking, is kind of how I refer to it. And then also, what are those things that are top of mind? So, also a place to kind of put those thoughts that maybe just keep racing around our head. So, kind of a way to reveal ourselves to ourselves, because what I think happens, especially when you do Spaghetti on the Wall, the journaling in that way over time, you will recognize those patterns, right? I know for myself, when particularly around decision making, I mean, when am I making decisions or choices that I end up regretting afterwards? Well, a lot of times if I'm rushed, if I feel like or I don't give myself permission to ask enough questions, if I'm tired, if I'm, so knowing this, um, just even for me, knowing that if I'm rushing, then I'm generally not going to make the best decisions. A great awareness for me is to be able to say, give myself permission and also kind of practice the language to say to people, when they're asking for asking right in the moment and wanting me to, give them an answer, just saying, may I take a little time on this? And just something as simple as that, right?
Absolutely. There's much to learn from you about all this, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more
Thank
about
you.
themselves through this or spiritual autobiography. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to do that. Read your journal, also Spaghetti on the Wall. What is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, the simplest way is to go to the website, kristanswan.com, and it's Kristan with an A. It's kind of an unusual spelling. But yeah, go to the website. You can see there's a sampling there's a page called the Experience Collective there where people have posted their spiritual autobiographies to share with others. There's also the ability to purchase a journal, a Spaghetti on the Wall journal, and we have an upcoming events page that will be letting folks know where the next Discovering Your Spiritual Autobiography workshops will be around the country in the United States.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining
Thank
us.
you.